We take the conference forward to our next session, which is a panel discussion on changing education outcomes through learning habits. The future of education lies in understanding the learning habits of students and attuning them to different learning styles and mediums. With this in mind, the panelists in this session will provide some very interesting and compelling insights on the way to achieve this. Please join me in welcoming our session moderator, Ms. Soumya, CEO of Grey Matters India, to take the proceedings ahead. Ms. Soumya?
Okay, I also welcome the other co-panelists to join me on stage here, please. Good morning. Okay. Sorry, we are also still figuring how this works, and we found our seats. As mentioned by the MC here, this panel is going to be about learning habits and how can learning habits improve learning outcomes. And I have with me 4 panelists who are from very different fields and very eminent, doing very eminent work. The purpose of this is like, again, what was being mentioned. The key sought after skill today is about lifelong learning, right? We want children to learn from starting at an early age, but also we never want learning to cease as they grow. And habits of learning have come to play a key role in how you monitor and manage and also tweak them, nudge them towards better practices, can definitely improve outcomes for whichever group of people that we are working with, whether they're very young children or very advanced learners. So with that introduction, I'm going to let the panel introduce themselves. In that order, I will also introduce myself and what we do, and then get back to some questions about learning habits and learning outcomes.
Hi, I'm Dave Cass. I am a director at the Maastricht School of Management in the Netherlands. I come with a background from actually not just higher education, but mostly in aerospace and logistics. And then now I've come back into higher education. And I'm in the extreme end of the education spectrum, if you like, and I'm dealing with postgraduates or senior executives with executive MBA, and also in high potential development with small selected courses.
Hi everyone, my name is Veronika Kenic. I am the founder and Chief Happiness Officer of Progress Hub Warsaw. We are an events and workshops space with 2 major things at the heart of our organization, and these are community building and personal development. So I am probably coming from the most extreme angle here because I do not lead with child education or adult education. I lead with like our sort of soul education and our purpose in life. So I will be speaking about the learning habits that we endeavor as individuals that we later on pass on to our colleagues, our children, our siblings, our families. Thank you.
So I'm Soumya. I lead an organization called Grey Matters India. Grey Matters India is based in India, obviously, and we work with K-10 students, and we are trying to make the conversation about measurement in education much more prevalent, because we believe that feedback to a system is one of the most important things that can drive it forward. And in education, I think everyone agrees at this point that one size fits all approach does not work. But no one knows what size fits every child either. So we're trying to create that measurement metric that can move the conversation forward on education, just like diagnostics did for healthcare. That's the space we're in.
Hi, I'm Vinay from Learning Links Foundation, India. Learning Links Foundation, a not-for-profit organization born out of idea that every child, youth, and citizen should get the best learning and rise to their potential. And that is the space that we work in with government and other eco-partners and community, that we firmly believe that every child has a right to quality education, and every child's potential has to be, it's not only what they study in the classroom, do their conventional study in benchmarking of summative assessments, but it is beyond that. It is beyond science, maths, and that is what we help students to work with. We largely, we promote innovation in students. We work on their enhancing quality in them, and the entire system that we work is a totally data-driven system that feeds into us what is the requirement in this complex world, how to simplify learning for student, and make student ready for the workforce, the 21st century that we speak about. That is what Learning Links works in, and I'm happy because of the approach that we have taken. Being agile and being data-driven, we have global partners and donors across the world to do such programs, to work with the most underprivileged students and kids in the rural and tribal areas of India. At the same time, we are also proud that we have reached out to around about 20 million kids through our various partnerships and donors in that. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Krishan Mishra. I represent ACCA, Association of Chartered Certified Accountants. Currently I manage the North and East India for the organization. We are a global body for professional accountancy based out of approximately around 183 countries globally. We have more than 500,000 students and around 2 million members of the qualification who are working across these 183 countries. As an organization, we believe in providing the qualification to people of ambition, ability, and application, and that's what we do across the globe. So with this panel discussion, we'd like to see that how we can actually add value to the learning outcomes and actually look at changing the habits of people at large. Although we might not change their habits right now, because at our age, actually when we are grown-ups, it's very difficult for us to change the habits because we already carry a baggage on our head. So we'll try to see that how best we can add value to it. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have this variety ranging from management to accountancy, then a soul growth, and then we have very early childhood and school learning. So we're going to look at learning from very, very different perspectives and look at what kind of habits, learning habits, and like Krishan clearly pointed out, it is probably more difficult to change habits in adults, but it's not easier in kids either, so to inculcate them. So with that, I'll throw the question open to all of you. And in your practices or in your work, what kind of learning habits or what kind of theories of learning habits are you working on changing in the target segments that you're working in? Who wants to go first? Dave, do you want to take that?
Okay, try that again. One thing which we found, we're dealing with people who are highly educated already or successful executives. But what we've found right at the beginning of our programs is if we want to improve the education and teamwork so that the people that we are training will be adaptable, easy to work in leaderless teams, equal in our full educational environment, as with businesses that we do consultancy work, we find that we do psychometric testing and how to deal with conflict within small team dynamics. Because very often we throw a problem at our students, in whichever school you may be at, and somehow we expect them to be able to deal with it and understand what it is to be a leader and to get them ourselves out of a problem. So we found that is a fundamental change that has made a huge difference to the output of all of our students, understanding leadership and team dynamics through psychometric testing initially.
Thank you. So let me first tell you why is community so important for us in the learning process. It's because one person's key life lessons and experiences may be another person's key to a happier life. And often we don't know because there's a limited amount of people we are able to be friends with or be surrounded by in our life. And often we go through the same struggles as someone else, and someone else has managed to get out of the struggle, and we do not know that. And during our all the workshops and events that we are running and we have run and we will run in the future, we always say that there is two key learning habits that are very important. And the first one is the habit of reflection. And it's the reflection on your own experience to start realizing, I guess you can call it feedback in education. It's because you start realizing, you can start connecting the dots of what have happened and why it has happened. And you can apply those, this logic to other spheres in your life. And you take, that's how you form the habit of not only learning on your experiences, but you learn the habit of analysis, of very careful and very reflective one. Do not mix that up with overthinking, because overthinking, as well as in education, as in your personal life, can lead to very damaging factors. And the other habit, which we try to actually get rid of in our members' society, is the fear of being wrong. And I think this can really easily also be it can be taken to the level of education, whether that's higher or primary, is that often people fear being wrong and they do not want to start speaking up about their opinions, about what they think is the right thing to do, and that can be taken to the level of children at school, to the people at university during workshops, during practical exercises, that we do not want to speak up because we're just extremely worried that someone else is going to look at us and is going to tell us, oh, this is so wrong. And the truth is, there is no wrong. We can all learn from each other's points of views. So I think, reflection and the fear of being wrong, one habit should be learned, the other habit should be gotten rid of. Thank you.
Yeah, I think if I look at changing learning habits in students, I take a step back. It is not only about to change a learning habit in a student, but it is also to change habits in a teacher teaching it, in a teacher doing that assessment of a student, in a school and a classroom giving that kind of a conducive environment where a student is free to change the learning habit. It is to work with the government for the kind of policies and the other systems to put in place where the student is given that kind of a freedom to learn, change in learning habits. And for that, everyone has to keep one step ahead, at least as a teacher and a management. You have to be a step ahead. What is the need going to be tomorrow's society? What is the workforce requirement? And that is where I change according to the needs for a student. We have seen in our experiences that while students are engaging, the activities are engaging, while students are co-learners, while there is a cooperation among students, it works well. When you give to them a real life situations to handle and work and problem solving, those are the learning habits, are the requirement of today. But are we all, again taking back, are we all ready for that as facilitators? What do we assess a student on at the end of in the classroom is what is a summative examination and how much has he got in science, maths. Where do we learn that how good and engaging was he, how good as a co-worker he was, how good was he in helping other students? And as she said was that the fear of being wrong comes as only when at the end you assess whether you are right or wrong. If you assess the entire journey of a student learning, then there's nothing of fear of being right or wrong. So that is where we feel is that, and we largely work with this underprivileged community on this only, that there's nothing right or wrong. Be engaging, be problem solvers, and that is where they feel confident about their learning, and their learning has a real application in today's world.
Okay, so thank you for highlighting this point, and I would like to step back further. Yeah, so it's very important for us to understand one thing, that a child is very creative till the age of 5. And this was a research which was done by an English newspaper of India called The Hindu. In the year 2008, they published this research and said that by the age of 5, a child is very creative. By the time they touch 30, their creativity goes down. And it actually diminishes with the increase in the age. Why they are creative? Because they don't know what is the difference between yes and no, what is right, what is wrong. They don't know that. But what we do is we actually tell them that, okay, this is not right, this is not correct, you should not do this, you should not do that. Most of the times we say no only to the child, and because of which what happens is he inculcates a habit that, okay, this is something which I should not be doing, instead of trying it and doing something different for himself in the long run. So what's important is when it comes to the parenting style for a child, that's really very important, that a parent has to teach, because a parent is the first teacher for the child. Whatever values children bring in, they actually come from the parents. Further to that, the teaching styles or the teachers, what you said rightly. And then there's the impact of media, the IT, advertising, whatever people see, children see, they actually start inculcating that, and these can be seen through the outcomes or the learning outcomes which are coming from all these mediums: parenting, teaching, media, as well as advertising. So all these things are impacting the child's habit. So it is very important for us to actually ensure that we actually inculcate the habit of saying yes to the children for the long term. So that's important. Yeah.
Yeah, so and to add to that, I have one more thing that we're trying to do as a habit creation. Before that, I'm going to ask you all a question. How many of you own like a fitness app or have it on your phone? It could be a Fitbit or a Google Fit or any other app that, yeah, a lot of you. And definitely you become much more aware of what you're doing, because whether you're doing enough activity or less activity, because that app has come into your life, because you're tracking it on a regular basis, all right? And you own your goals. You can move up, move down your goals, and it's ownership of the achievement is with you, right? And that is the kind of learning habit we are trying to create with assessments, so that children and teachers can own that learning outcomes of whatever they're doing. And it was a great conversation around the panel, and interestingly, I was taking notes and I see that there are very, very common threads that are coming through, right? One key thing that came out is fear of being wrong, creativity, risk-taking. They're all linked, and I think across age groups, whether they are kids or whether they're adults, I think the risk-taking or fear of being wrong is high across all. While it is lesser in kids, but we teach them, like Krishan was saying, to be afraid of making mistakes over a period of time. And I think that is one habit, to take the risk or to create the context where they're free to take risks and not be fearing being wrong, is one key thread that came across. And they've mentioned adaptability, and I think adaptability belongs again in this particular segment of being, and it is one of the key things that is looked forward in the 21st century, that we be able to adapt to newer and newer careers. And the other thing that came out is that of stakeholders. It's not about changing just your habits, and I think it's been proven in psychology a lot that it's not about you changing what you do, but what your friends do, or what your teachers do, or what your media context, everything that is doing around you affects how you learn, or any other habit that you're trying to develop. So I think these are great inputs, and these are important for educators such as you, largely because a lot of times we may have great solutions, but if we are not looking at how to create those outcomes more actively by managing the habits of our learners, whatever age they are, it's going to be challenging and much more of an uphill task for all of us. And with that, I'm going to ask the panel to talk through some of their experiences in changing one habit or of one learner or a system of learners, and how their experience of doing that process of changing a learning habit to achieve learning outcomes. I'm going to start from this side for now, for a change.
Thank you. Thank you, Soumya. And it is very important for us to understand one thing, that it's not about learning, it's more about relearning and sometimes unlearning also. So when we look at unlearning, that's the most difficult thing for any individual. And when we say that, okay, when you talk to someone, say for example, I'll talk about coaching. Now, coaching is slightly different from mentoring an individual. And what we do is in our organization, I'll talk about my organization as such. So there is a phenomenon of 70, 20, and 10. When we say 70, it means that 70% of the learning is through the on-the-job training that you get, on-the-job work that you do. 20% is obviously through the coaching and mentoring, and 10% is something which is a formal learning. When I say coaching and mentoring, it's both the things are slightly different from each other, because a mentor is someone who will guide you, but a coach is someone who will actually lead you from the back. The phenomenon changes here. Most of the times we hear that, okay, people will lead you from the front. They'll talk about leading by examples. Here we are talking about leading from the back, wherein you give more opportunities to people, and things actually change there. For example, it's not about being an entrepreneur when you are outside in the industry, right? You start your own business. It's actually about becoming an entrepreneur while you are within the organization. So entrepreneurship is something which is taking over the entrepreneurship thing for a lot of large organizations. In fact, organizations are giving more opportunities to people to start their own ventures, to actually look at newer projects, newer relationships, right? So that freedom to actually work on things, and the power of telling them that, okay, I'm there with you in case you fail also. That failure is something which actually needs to be supported, because that failure actually becomes a learning or an experience for the individual. So that's very, very important. That's what we practice in our organization. We give freedom to people to work as entrepreneurs and actually produce long-term results. And that has actually helped us a lot. And what I feel is that, yes, you need to become a coach for the long term. And one quote I would like to say here is that, you might have heard about this, that you need to put yourself in the shoes of the other person. So it's very important for you to, first of all, remove your own shoes before you get into the shoes of the other person, right? So that's actually called more empathizing and actually looking at the empathy for the long term. Thank you. Yeah.
I'll here share a small story, and we'll see what is the ripple effect when we talk of changing learning habits. We want lifelong learners. We don't want learners who study today, give exam and pass out a classroom and they forget about it. And for that they have to practically, application of that knowledge is very important. And that is what we believe in, and that is what we work with teachers and schools, that whatever maybe science as a subject, math as a subject where people run away from that. There's always a phobia of math as a subject. But the idea is to have that scientific temperament in them to boost that and motivate that. So the story is of two girls from a very rural village in one of the states in Andhra Pradesh, which is below poverty, and probably they were the first generation learners. And the topics is in science, and they learn about, again in science, they learn about circuits, sensors, and other things that are coming up. Now, is the problem solving and innovation was that they've been given that where you learn about sensors, you learn about, again, electrical applications and other things, how do you use it? These two girls made a system, disruptive technology. They made a system where with the sensors, they will get to know if there is a cattle moving around their farms. And someone can go and save the farm from these cattle. And in the night also when they sleep, if there is a cattle somewhere near about the sensor, there is a huge beep and a sound where the cattle run away from that. And this is what is a real life application that you look at. There is a problem solving learning, and this learning is going to be lifelong. These two girls were given a prize of like 1 lakh rupees from the Chief Minister of the state for them to develop into an entire product for themselves. These two girls who could have learned the same subject in a classroom today are learning it as an entrepreneurs, as innovators, as problem solvers, as co-learners, co-workers together. And the ripple effect is that more girls are motivated. The society where they are from the first generation learners in a rural village in India, the community, there is a movement in the community to send girls to schools. So a small change in a learning habit and how do we assess it and how do we look at it can have an entire shift in the way the teachers work with the students, the community, the parents, everyone move it. And these are the two confident girls for tomorrow's world.
Thank you. Oh my God, what a brilliant moment, because my 2 points actually lead very well to what you both said, because the way those two girls in rural India, they collaborated, it just shows like the beauty and the power of co-creation and the importance of learning as a habit, how to co-create, how the needs, observing the needs of one person and then observing the skills of the other person can create something amazing. And what Christian was talking about earlier was the failure, the notion of failure. And I think that one of the very recent events we were hosting at Progress Hub, one of the guests said that how did he word it exactly? I think he said something that you learn, you choose habits. You don't choose your future, you choose habits, and then the habits choose your future. And this is something that really stayed with me, and I thought that it's absolutely brilliant, because that is essentially where sort of our anxiety comes from in life, is not knowing the future and sort of fearing not being able to control it. And probably realizing that maybe we will never be able to control it, but we will be able to learn and pick the habits that then will choose our future, is a huge step. So that's, thank you.
Okay, two quick examples, one positive, one negative. There was a survey about 3 years ago done that talked about active disengagement in the workforce, and the statistics are eye-watering to see how percentage of people are actively disengaged. I think in Germany it's something like 112 to 138 billion euros is lost through active disengagement. So how do you create a learning habit, an educational habit, when such a large percentage of your workforce is disengaged? Before this job, I worked for Amazon setting up its logistics business in Berlin. Amazon has a brilliant way of getting people engaged and active learning through life. And it's quite simple. They have a electronic telephone system. If you look up anyone, you get the name, and then you see all the badges that they have, and you can create little bitmap badges for serious events or for education. And it's weird, it works. It's a little bit like being in kindergarten with gold stars. People collect them, and it creates that sort of educational ethic. It really is the best example I can think of. One of the most difficult things we have in higher education is stopping a bad habit. And this is the amount of students that come to us that believe the first two articles on Google are relevant to whatever their thesis is, whatever they're talking, and correct. And the biggest habit that we have in higher education, I think, is getting students to be highly critical of the sources of their information. And if we don't nip that in the bud, we've got real problems for the future.
Again, a great set of experiences. I'm going to speak about our own as an organization, where we changed the ripple effect showing up in a much larger context of an entire state system undergoing reformation. So in India, Haryana is a state that was showing poor learning outcomes for many years now. And through a system of regular monitoring through assessments, today the conversation in the state has moved from rote learning to talking about skills and competencies for these children, right? So we had a district education officer come down and tell us, he was also a teacher for grade 3 English, and he said, today we speak, when I teach my child the poem about rain, I know I'm not just teaching him to memorize that poem, but I am teaching him to understand about weather and what different seasons mean and things like that. So that's the competency I'm building in him. And because of that, because of these, it was more of a regular initiative of testing students, and in some ways, like Dave said, collecting stars. So each administrative unit could nominate itself to be certified as a grade level block, like they had basically achieved certain competencies. And that kind of a star collection and a lot of prestige and award attached to that kind of an achievement got a ripple effect going all the way from the top administrative offices of the country down to the student, to the teacher and the student. And this whole participatory approach has been really inspiring in the state. As of the last time we tested, 80% of the administrative units in the state have achieved basic level competency. And this in the Indian public school system is a huge, huge leap to have achieved. And why were we able to do that? Largely because we were pushing for accountability and pushing for ownership of their goals by themselves. Right, so I think, again, that has been our experience in using learning habits, or rather stakeholder management, to improve learning habits, basically. I think from all the different stories, again, the threads were common. I could see that you could change one habit and you could create a huge ripple effect, like you said. And then there is also creating empathy and a sense of, again, risk-taking, coaching, and mentoring. And we had disengagement, which I think is a big issue in the employment sector at this point. And studies keep churning out that employees are disengaged, but employees or learners for that matter. But very little has been done in that space. And I love what Veronica said about habits. You choose habits that choose your future. And as educators, we have the power to help our children or our learners, whoever they are, choose the habits and then create a future for them by enabling them to choose the right habits. And with that, I'd ask for any last thoughts from the panel, so we can throw the floor open for questions. Do you guys want to add anything at this point? You would want to?
Just one point, and as you have rightly mentioned, Soumya, that it is very important for students to actually apply what they have learned. And that's the actually gap between what is being taught in the classroom and what actually they do on the table when they are in the organizations. So interestingly, I represent an accounting organization, so I'll talk in the accounting term, that today the P&L accounts and balance sheets are not prepared by human beings anymore. These are being prepared by the robots. Yeah, and it's very important for us to actually understand that how this report is going to impact my organization, rather than just looking at the numbers. So that mindset is changing, and that's a change in the behavior of individuals, because robots have taken over. In fact, with the advent of AI, machine learning, blockchain, a lot of newer concepts have come up. And in fact, although AI has been prevalent for a very long time, since 1952, but then it has become a buzzword now, and it is impacting all of us. So it's important not only to just learn, but it is actually important for us to look at continuous learning, because learning is lifelong. Till the last breath of our life, we need to learn, and it's really very important for us to learn newer things regularly, rather than just thinking that I have aged now, so I should stop learning. No, you have to keep on learning till the last breath of your life. Thank you.
I would just like to add to this, when it says lifelong learning, I think as educators and facilitators, we have to look at what is the requirement down the line. And yesterday I was in Dubai roaming and seeing, and we understand by 2030, nearly 65% of the jobs won't exist. We don't know which those jobs would be. And as facilitators, if we want to bring that learning habit change, it is the time now. And if I do a backward design, I see the student who's in class 6 standard today would be ready for the workforce in 2030. So will the same learning habits continue that time? If we don't know what are the requirements then what are the skills that we have to build in them? And as the things are going, and as I saw yesterday, somewhere it was written by 2030, the entire Dubai transport system would be automated. Somewhere it was written the entire medical facility would be automated by 2030. So as he said about AI also. So I think we have to inculcate those kind of learning habits right now, from now, for our students to face the workforce of 2030. Be it data analytics, be it data research, be it coding, which is the new language now. So be it interdisciplinary studies. And those are the kind that every teacher and a facilitator, and assessments for that matter, have to right now work with students tomorrow.
I bring the subject of KPIs up because it was mentioned in the keynote, first keynote speaker's element. And often I see in educational establishments, when I troubleshoot or if I go into businesses, the destructive capability of KPIs as well as the positive effects. And we need to acknowledge that. And the serious bad habits that can happen in education if you get your KPIs wrong and if you weight it in such a way that for the faculty, there is a sense of fear if they impose something on the students or a requirement that it becomes negatively reflected on them. And certainly in one education establishment I've worked, we completely changed the KPIs because just the weighting was wrong, and that changed the faculty habits, which therefore fed into better education.
Yeah, and we hear that a lot. What's measured is what is taught, right, in schools, basically. And you set the wrong targets or wrong KPIs, and to use the word, yeah, everything can go for a toss. And again, great thoughts there about, we've been speaking about lifelong learning from the beginning of the session. I think it's one key thing for all educators to understand. How do you inculcate lifelong learning as a habit? And I think it varies at different stages of how do you inculcate the mindset of lifelong learning. And I think that goes with adaptability as well in terms of how do you go. Yeah, yeah. And I think when I made a very important point about a workforce, an education system, at least I'm talking about younger learners here, the education system that is outdated for the future work requirements or employment requirements, and how we as educators or stakeholders of education actually make modifications in the system within the limits it provides to create adaptable individuals who can work in any kind of employment setting.
Yeah, it's a very, very good point. Actually, about the KPIs, it's something that is links very well when it comes to also people's not only educational development but personal, because people often don't realize that sort of the hard skills, actually the bullet points that are required of them is one side of the spectrum, but the other side is the soft skills. It's the ability to cope with failing to tick off the certain boxes. And I think when it comes to talking about the 2030 workforce and about like learning habits, another one which is very, very important is just acceptance, is just realizing that often what we aim for is not what happens, and it's this agility to also realize that if it's not one way, it's the other. The world doesn't end when a KPI is not achieved. The world ends when we are disengaged and we don't want to just cope and fight on. So I think it's just the balance of everything we discussed, really.
Thank you, Veronica. That was a good wrap, I think. And I think with that, we do have enough time, and I'm going to throw it open for questions. Everyone okay with that? Yeah. So, yeah, I think we have one hand right up there.
Hello. Yeah. Okay. So hi, my name is Nikhil Sharma. I represent a company called Intercell, and we are basically a virtual mentor network where we're trying to connect a lot of students, postgraduates with the industry experts, and basically help them be ready for the world when they kind of pass out. So I have a very simple question, and I actually resonate a lot with Mr. Krishnan Mishra, a lot of things that he mentioned. But what we have realized, and also being students ourselves at one point in time, education is... Can you put the microphone closer to your mouth? Yeah. Okay, so, yeah, so we being student at certain point in our lives as well, what we realize that the education is very inclusive. And when the students are passing out, they are evaluated on basis like their leadership skills, their skills of how they can work with people, how they can manage the system, how they can manage the politics, so to say. And these are the things that you are kept away from at your formative years. Primarily, like Sir said, when you're growing up, when you're 4 years old, 5 years old, or even when in your teens, these are things not taught you. It's very inclusive. Your course, your marks, your tests, and you're passing out. So it's very selfish way of learning. I learned in a very selfish way that it's about me and my performance. Then I go to college, things change around. And in today's world, when the information is available to you, do you think our education needs to be more proactive than reactive? Where we have now talking about artificial intelligence in only handful of colleges, so to say, when it should have been there probably 15, 20 years back. So that's what my question today is, that, the education outcomes are, we're talking about learning habits, but are we making the students ready for what the market wants when they pass out? So.
I'm going to give that to the higher education people to start with, and then.
Yeah, Nikhil, I completely agree with you. I still remember when I was in school, so we had a black and white textbook, and I saw a picture of a camera at that time. And I did not realize the importance of a camera till the time the camera did not come to my hand and I was able to click a picture. So that's the biggest gap which is there between what we are taught in the classroom and what actually happens at the ground level. So you're completely, I'm with you that yes, you're right that education needs to be more proactive. And in fact, what has happened is nowadays organizations like us and various other organizations have started coming forward, and they are supporting the institutions, because it's difficult to change the curriculum because it is completely regulated by the government, right? And it is difficult to change the process also because teachers teach you what is there in the textbook. And in fact, they would like you to answer the same thing in your answer sheet also, because ultimately they score you basis that. And that's why everybody scores 90%, right? But what is more important is not about what has been taught you in the classroom, but how you are able to actually apply that when you go out in the workplace. So that's the step we are taking. We are actually trying to bridge that gap. And we are in the journey of making people more agile, more application-oriented. And I'm sure it will take time, but definitely we are on the right road and the path towards that. So I completely resonate what you're saying. Thank you.
Hello?
Yeah, we are, sorry, are we still answering the question? From my point of view, we find that we actually started a completely new degree, Masters in Management for us, specifically aimed at people coming out of engineering bachelors and actually within the healthcare industry. So specialist people, if you like, kind of trained in dealing in black and white, but they had no soft skills. And that's where we found a massive market and a real need for improvement. And you can be the best engineer, physicist in the world, but if you can't pitch your idea in a business-like way, it's a waste of time. And so that's what we spend, that's where our market is. And that's why we are a school of choice for those very reasons. And we're very linked with industry, and many of our group activities, in fact we just finished one with the strategic development goals, actually parachuting our students in as consultants to make changes within local government or within businesses along those lines. So there's a real mix. And we see our clients, the students, because they want to get their qualification and a good job, and the marketplace. So we have two clients.
Hope that answers your question. Next, anyone else?
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you very much for sharing your perspectives on how learning habits determine educational outcomes. I have a question, and I would like to know what are the implications of these habits on teaching and also the organization of school and management of schools, because these have implications. Collaboration and all the habits are not found in the classroom. Teachers are not trained to use those methods, to change people's habits and get them to achieve certain learning outcomes.
I'll take that up. I think that definitely when you're trying to change habits that are entrenched for many years in teaching processes, or even for that matter learning processes, the resistance is very, very high, both from different stakeholders, whether it is teachers, sometimes the students themselves when they're adult learners, or the other stakeholders in the system. There are two ways that that definitely has to be handled, because no matter what you try to do, if there is unlearning not happening, or if they are not willing to adopt the habit change that you're trying to inculcate, whatever efforts you do is not going to move forward. We've achieved that by two methods. One is one end of the spectrum is where it's mandated. It's just a top-down approach. It works better in very large-scale public systems where the accountability is driven top-down and said, hey, you just have to do it. It's a KPI, so to say, and it has to be done. And it works well in very hierarchical, like I said, a public school system where there are too many layers. In more of the private school systems, or when you're looking at individual learners, it's about inculcating intrinsic motivation, and there are, or not, like something following the nudge theory, where you make small movements towards a larger habit change, and that's more of a softer aspect, and that works better in contexts where the individual or the system, like an individual private school, is invested in improving itself, and that's the other extreme of making those habit changes happen. Anyone else want to add?
I see it beyond the classroom and the school also. If the learning habits don't change, how the implication. India, we are near to 1/5 of the population of the world. We are the 4th largest economy, but we are lowest in GDP. And that is where the learning habits had not changed. The workforce was not ready. And that is what has to be constantly reminded in the schools as well as with the government for policy, that the changes are required. At the end of the day, the education outcome, if not, but largely is for a good living, is for the workforce for tomorrow. And to prepare them for that, the changes have to happen today. As I said, like from class 6 standard today, I have to start working on a student for a workforce of 2030. And the changes have to start right now. As the previous question also he said, yeah, we are late and we are inclusive, and that is the change that we have to bring in the entire system. That is the most important. Resistance would be there, but there are some good stories. There are motivating stories which have to be highlighted, talked about, recognized, rewarded, so that most of them fall in that line.
Yep. Question? There are 2 here. So we have one at the back. Hello. And then we'll take the 2 from the front. Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah.
So my name is Rohit, and I'm from India. I'm an entrepreneur and an educator as well. So it was a fantastic discussion. Thank you so much for opening our eyes. So my question is, from an Indian educational point of view, I have seen many students since kindergarten trying to focus on just one thing, that is a number on their scorecard. It's just like a cutoff for everything. If they want to get promoted to a higher class, they need to have a cutoff. When I was studying in 9th standard, to get promoted to my 10th grade, the school gave us a chance. We need to get 75% cutoff mark. And luckily, I got 76%, so I got promoted. But many of my friends, even though they scored just 74%, they were asked to repeat the whole year. So when we went to colleges, again, the same thing, cutoff for everything. So the learning habit, what I've seen is that since childhood, people are focusing on getting the numbers rather than getting results. So is there something as global educators that we can do to create a platform or create something so that we get maximum results out of it rather than people focusing on scores? If I have to go at an MBA in an international college, I need to get a good score in GMAT, and it's a multi-billion-dollar industry back in India, coaching for GMAT. So it's business-oriented scores rather than results. And this made me a person, when I passed out of my college, I decided that score is not something that should lead my life. So even though I'm also a technical person, I thought that I wouldn't follow the scorecard. I would learn things from myself, and I would succeed in my life. So how many of us, how many kids, how many children get this opportunity? And what are the habits that we can cultivate to create the shift? So that's my question.
Sure, thank you. I'll just quickly take that one. I think that was the story of about 10 years ago. I think the conversations are moving on the ground. People are, I think, for that matter, many universities in the US are saying they're not going to take SAT scores anymore. They're trying to move away from the scoring model. It's a very, very entrenched system that has been sitting with us since the industrial age, and it's going to take that many years to completely weed it out. That's my opinion, but the movement has started on that. Other panelists, anyone wants to pitch in on that?
That's a brilliant question.
Yes, yeah, all right. Just give us just 2 quick questions. Can you?
Okay, go ahead.
Right, we'll just close with that. I saw the 2 hands up. If we can quickly ask the questions crisp, then. Get them a mic, please. Okay, go ahead. That's fine. I think whoever else doesn't get a chance, we'll talk to you outside the panel. Yes.
Thank you so much to the panel for such exciting insights and wonderful tips. That was literally informative. Being in the education industry, we focus in the transnational education. I always had this burning question which I wanted to ask experts like you all. Can we, or is there a possibility to have a universally uniform way of education that is based on values, skills, and obviously the emotional intelligence aspect? Because, you know, just like countries have borders, you know, we have CBSE, we have IGCSE, we have A levels. So is
in
there
the interest
a way?
of time, we got your question, so I'm going to throw it open for answer.
Yeah, thank you.
I got the question. Yeah. Anyone wants to take that up?
Well, we're all slaves to accreditation and the various accreditation norms that there are. So you can't get escape from that if you want your national accreditation or whatever. Having said that, we fundamentally focus on ethical, sustainable management. So if you're talking about those as a common skill, that is actually less than 1 on all our courses in all of the 13 countries that we're teaching. So we do have a common core, if you like, which attacks some of your question, but I'm afraid with accreditation, it's a divide and conquer game.
In the school segment, there is GFEL as a framework for emotional learning that is provided. It's more global, and in India they've developed something called iSelf now, which is again a framework that provides a kind of a curriculum for doing regular classes on learning emotional intelligence, basically, but very nascent stages on that. Anyone else wants to contribute to that at this point? Okay, and
We'll take one last question.
Yes, please.
Yes.
So I'm a learner, and I would like to learn from all of you. So if you can share your top learning habit and one tool that I can use tomorrow, or we can use tomorrow in our environments to promote that learning habit. So one learning habit and one tool that I can promote that learning habit tomorrow. Something doable, something simple.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we did go through that, but it's probably a quick way to put it. I think one learning habit for me is monitoring yourself more regularly, which was what I started with saying. And I think there are a lot of different education apps and gamified apps that can allow you to keep measuring as you learn. So you could be using one of those, basically.
So one learning habit which I have inculcated very recently is that instead of providing solutions, I ask questions. Yeah. So, okay. See, it's always good to give an opportunity to the other person rather than providing him a solution, because the other person will definitely come up with the right answer. So it's actually coaching skills, which is important for all of us. And then obviously it is very important when you have one-to-one conversations with people, rather than just focusing on business or numbers, you need to talk about their personal things. So if you're able to do that, you'll be able to develop that emotional quotient, which is there for the long term for everyone. Yeah.
And as she said, there are too many tools, online apps and something. I think most important is keep yourself cyber safe. Whenever you, and with the kids it's most important, as there's more growing of information online, portals, apps and something. I think that learning habit to inculcate it in all our students to be cyber safe. Media literacy is most important one tool if I see the way we are going ahead.
Positivity, I think. It's a big habit, and it's really difficult to learn if you're not positive or don't come from a positive thinking family. like things will be okay. I know it applies to your personal life and more than the education sector, but it also does. If you fail, like there were questions about like failing a grade, failing a year, you can redo it as long as you keep positive. So I think that's my learning habit.
I think in general is be inquisitive and actually be generalist inquisitive. Not only will you educate yourself, but actually you'll improve your personal skills because you'll be dealing with people. And I tend to say if you're being inquisitive, then use the 5 whys so you can actually get to the root causes of things and learn something in depth rather than scraping a veneer and you become a 5-minute expert in something when you're not.
That's the last question. We're out of time. So any of you have more questions, we're happy to take that offline. I want to thank the panelists, and to all of you as you leave the room, I think just ask yourself, what is that habit or a bunch of habits that can make your education journey better for your learners, and ask that question. I think that's a good start. Yeah. Thank you so much for all your participation. Thank you so much.